Thank you. And I have to say, I did not, even though I was working on the 2016 elections, I could not do any kind of color switching there. So do not hold me responsible for any of that. And I also will tell you that we're going to see some screenshots from CNN.com from, I think it was November 8th, 2016. So just be prepared that you will be kind of reliving that night a little bit. So we're going to start off with just a quick exercise, and then I'm going to introduce myself a little bit more, tell you about my history, how I started thinking object-orientedly. So you'll see on the first sheet, and don't skip ahead. If you've already skipped ahead, that's okay, but might be a little bit of a spoiler if you skip ahead on your packets. Does everybody have a packet? No? If you don't have a packet, maybe make a friend or get out a piece of paper. Do you have paper? Okay, if you have a paper and a pen, you'll be okay. And kind of like just look at somebody else's packet. So the first one is very simple. All I want you to do is I want you to look at this word and feel free to use your native language, but I want you to think of the first 3 words that you think of that come into your head when you see this word. So this is just a word association. You have about 10 seconds, so do not overthink it. This is a private activity. Don't consult with your neighbors. Just what you think of when you think of this. Okay. Dobrze? Good. Yeah. Okay. All right. One more time. First 3 words that you think of when you think of this. Okay, and we're just going to set that aside. We'll come back to it later. Okay, so my name is Sophia Voychehovski. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia. You can see the spelling of my last name is very bastardized, if you will. So my father is Polish. My father is from Lublin. I have family in Lublin, so I'm super excited to be back here. Actually, I have family in Warsaw as well. But I am from Atlanta. I was born in the United States, and I am American. I started my UX career about almost 10 years ago, coming up on about a decade. And right now, I have my own very small studio. I'm basically an independent consultant. And more of what I'm doing, almost 100% of my work right now, is doing specifically object-oriented UX design. I have people come to me specifically for this type of design, for this methodology, and I teach at workshops and within companies. But it wasn't always like that. I worked at a lot of agencies where I had to be beholden to processes that I did not agree with for a long time. And it took me, actually, the past 4 years have really been a journey of solidifying this experience. And I'm always kind of learning and evolving it. So object-oriented UX is basically what I do. I don't do any other type of design. And this is what I meant by it might be hard to unthink this, because once I started thinking in this way and building digital platforms, digital apps, even games, in this manner, I really haven't been able to do it in any other way. So in 2012, so I have been working independently for the past 3 years. I specialize in educational technology, so if there's anybody out there in ed tech, come talk to me. We can geek out about education. Also healthcare as well is super interesting to me as well, so let's talk about how we can change well-being and healthcare through technology and through design. But in 2012, I was working internally. The only place I ever worked internally and not as a consultant was at CNN. How am I talking? Am I talking too fast for English as a second language? Okay, let me know if I start talking too fast, because this 90-minute talk is actually more like a 2-hour talk. So I'm gonna blah, blah, blah. So I'm really going in hyperspeed here, but if I start talking too fast, just like start, going like this or something like that. Slow down, Sophia. So in 2012, I was working internally at a little company called CNN, which is headquartered in Atlanta, and I was a lead UX designer at CNN, and I got brought on in 2011 to redesign CNN.com, to help redesign CNN.com, and to make it do this new responsive design thing that was all the rage in 2011. If any of you go to CNN or regulars on CNN, you will know that the responsive redesign did not launch until 2015. But I was brought on in 2011, actually, to start thinking about that. Now, 2012 rolled around, and it was about June of 2012 when the design team and the powers that be there kind of realized, oh, it's an election year. We should probably start thinking about this and what we're going to do for results night, for literally what is going to happen, how are people going to get their data? Because a lot of people, when they're looking to see what is happening when the presidential results and also Senate and House and governor, all of those elections that are happening, they're going to be looking at their TV screen, but more and more, especially in 2012 versus 2008, what else are they going to be looking at other than their TV screen? Yeah, 2008, not so much, right? That was just about, what, like a year after the iPhone came out? We actually just did a history of the iPhone, right? Around, it was very, very new that people were going to actually be going to their phones for this type of information. But 2012, for sure, that had definitely changed. We needed to make sure, and it was on tablets too. We had tablets in 2012. So we wanted to make sure that we were going to be able to see data on a phone, on a tablet, on the screen, and that all that data was going to be synced up. So the powers that be there said, we should do this thing responsively because it's going to make our data viz a lot easier to make sure everybody's seeing the same numbers. So that seems like a really great idea, but the thing is we had a designer who had never done responsive design. We had a development team who had never done responsive design. We had a leadership and editorial staff who had no idea what responsive design even meant. And we had a very tight timeline, and we had a deadline that sure as hell wasn't going to move. Right? We had to launch on November 9th. So it was a very stressful period. And I specifically was brought on about 4 days before development, the first development sprint was going to start. And they said, and I started freaking out. I was like, I don't have time to design this. I don't really even know how our government works. I got to go Wikipedia that. So I got brought on at really the 11th hour. I didn't have much time to think about design, much less think holistically about the design. And my manager told me, in this very pivotal moment of my career, my manager sat down and said, don't freak out, it's okay. We've already designed the sprint schedule. We've looked at 2008's templates, so we know that there's 9 templates that you're gonna need. And we've designed the sprint schedule based on those templates, and we're gonna be starting off with a state template, like Georgia, California, Arizona. There's gonna be a state template, and we're starting with the state template. So we only need 3 wireframes from you. We need mobile and tablet and desktop for the state template, and that's it. And I had been asked before to design a cog in a machine without thinking about the whole machine, and that had been all right in the past before responsive design. I could think about things page by page, but something about responsive design, and what I did know about responsive design is that complexity was going to snowball as it came from me, my wireframes, to development, and then especially QA, right? Because now we need to test these things on multiple devices. So let's just say I design 2 modules where there could have been 1 module. Not a big deal for me. But now think about the development. Now we're going to have to say, okay, how is this module going to work on different screen sizes? And now we have to make sure that that module, those 2 modules, instead of that 1 module, doesn't break on all these screens. So then we have to do additional quality assurance to make sure that it works out really nicely. So basically, the complexity from me down the stream gets more and more, basically it's exponential. So I knew that I needed to create a least effective dose of moving parts. I don't know if you guys have this saying, but what is What does every engineer know about the number of moving parts? The fewer moving parts, the less likely it is to break, right? You don't want more moving parts than what you have to have. So to me, this idea of designing just the state template and then like going on to the next template, what was going to happen? What I could kind of like see myself in the future, I was like, I'm going to design a module one way for this template, and then I'm going to want to move that module to another template, and I'm going to want to change things around. And I might even say, well, actually, this new design would work over there, but that ship has already sailed. That page has been developed, right? So instead of designing that one template, I did not do as I was told, and I instead sat down and said, how can I create a system with fewer moving parts? And what I did is I reduced the templates from 9 templates to about 4 templates. And I reduced, I think there was like a couple dozen modules in the 2008 design that was not responsive. We had 4 modules, and this is not producing any less information, right? We're not cutting corners on actually what we're producing and how much we're showing. We're actually just showing it in a much more concise and simple way. And I can guarantee you, sometimes people say, oh, well, you know, maybe that, like, wasn't that kind of boring? People are like looking at the same thing over and over again. And I can guarantee no user ever said, oh, I wish there was more stuff for me to look at here. I wish there was more modules that I had to understand. And I'm going to really be driving that point home later. So this is kind of what got me on the speaking circuit, is we were successful. We did a really good job in 2012, and we pushed out an awesome responsive design. We were the only news outlet that had a responsive design for election results in 2012. It was a huge challenge that nobody else took on. And it worked. It was great. So I got asked to speak in 2013 about this, because in 2013, I don't know if you remember conferences in 2013, it was like, let's talk about responsive design, because it's this huge thing. So I was asked to go speak about responsive design, and I came up with like, and you know, when you're asked to speak about something, and as a side note, if you want to talk about public speaking, also come talk to me, because I think it's a wonderful thing, because it helps you develop your ideas. Teach what you need to learn, right? So I had to figure out how to condense what actually did happen. What did we do right? What did we do wrong? How am I going to talk about this thing? And I came up with, these are the principles you need to have for responsive design. And I called it the simplicity imperative, and it was all about how do you simplify? How do you create this elegant simplicity? And the funny thing is that I realized about 2 weeks before the talk is that all of these principles that I had outlined, these are my top 3, I had like 5 or something, are things that are not just for responsive design. These are things that we should have been doing all along, but that responsive design just kind of forced us to do. Before, we should always be prioritizing prioritization of things on the screen. That should be always a really big part of our process. But we never had to until we had to say, this is going to be in one column at one point in time. So we got to say, like, this is number 1, this is number 2, this is number 3, before we had our prioritization matrices and we had like 80% was ones, right? So we'd end up with these designs where everything was trying to push above the fold. And we had all the stuff in the navigation, right? Because we didn't have to prioritize. And so I realized these are just best practices in general, that responsive design had this kind of cool extra benefit of, at least for me, I think it actually made me a better designer, because I really had to think of things that I wasn't forced to think of before. Okay, so we're going to do a quick game, and we're going to guess which side is responsive. Does everybody know what responsive design is? We're good there, right? Okay, designer. I sometimes talk to groups that there's lots of other disciplines like marketing, and sometimes there's people that I need to kind of talk about what responsive design is. So this is lightingdirect.com. And this is skinnyties.com. Which one is responsive? Skinny ties? Okay, cool. We're going to do one more. Here's the London Tube. And here's the Atlanta Public Transit website, marta.com, or itsmarta.com. Which one do you think is responsive? The London Tube. And this is a beautiful, do we have any Londoners here? This is a really nice site, huh? Do you actually use this site? This is a screenshot from a while ago, but I think it still kind of looks the same. They did a really beautiful job with it. So how is this so easy? No, we didn't pull this. These are screenshots. We didn't pull this up in the browser and do browser torture. Nobody like got on their phone real quick to check it out. How could we tell so easily, other than the fact that the non-responsive ones look very more dated? This was actually developed, I think, in like 2011 or something like that. How did we know? What were some giveaway signs that this was the responsive one? Grid. Anything else? What's that? Modular. You can kind of blur your eyes, right? If you do the eye squinty test, and you can see the things, and you can say, this is the most important thing, and then these are two other things, and here's another you can see the things. And you can kind of also see how it might scrunch down. You can see the prioritization much more clearly. If you look at this and you squint your eyes on this, it just goes bleh, right? Okay, so this was super easy. Now, we heard modular design. Does everybody here, can anybody like define modular design for me? Anybody think Lego bricks? Right, okay. Reusable parts, components, okay. Does everybody, let's just see a show of hands. Who feels like they design in a modular way? They use modular design on a regular basis? Not everybody? Okay. I want to talk to the people that don't feel like they use modular design. That's interesting. Okay, so I, for a long time, thought that what I was teaching was modular design. I was actually calling it modular design for a really long time. Anybody out there that has read Atomic Design yet? Good old Brad Frost. Yes, he got his book out, I think, sometime earlier this year or last year. So, object-oriented UX is not modular design. I started calling it object-oriented UX because I didn't know what else to call it, and it seemed about right, and it seems to sort of resonate with people. Has anybody read the Alyssa Part article that I wrote in 2015? Maybe, okay. I wrote this article in 2015 about object-oriented UX, and it got a very, very positive response. One of the reasons why I continue to do this work is because it was like my 30 minutes of fame on Twitter. But in the comments, if you read the comments, it's a lot of positive stuff, but people actually were debating on what to call this. Some people said that I should call it semantic UX, but the acronym for that would not be great. So, OOUX is not modular design, but they work hand in hand. Object-oriented UX is what informs your really solid modular design. And doing modular design without the object-oriented UX component, I feel like is doing a disservice. So let me talk a little bit more about how these guys are different. And I'll give a definition of object-oriented UX, and I have popularized this / coined it, so I think I can make up a definition. But it's helpful to look at it in comparison to modular design. So if you think about, so I worked for a performing arts center, or I was a consultant for a performing arts center in Atlanta for a little while, and the way that I was explaining it to them is I was explaining that the performance, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, that's the thing that users care about. When they go to the site to get their tickets, they're looking at the performances. What are the things that you have on your stage? And the ticket is literally in this, and there's the seat and there's the ticket. Like, where are they going to put their butt and what night are they going to put their butt in your theater? And that's the thing that they care about. They don't necessarily care about your landing page tile or your billboard slider or your sidebar module, all the things that you label in your module library, right? They're looking, where are the performances? What is the thing? And that's kind of the distinction. It's a little bit of a philosophical distinction, but there's the thing that the user actually cares about, and then there's the thing that represents that thing. That's the module. That's the digital thing on the screen. And I'm going to talk more about this, but the thing that I think is kind of, I believe, is 98% of the problems on the internet is without doing object-oriented UX, you risk creating what I call shapeshifter modules and masked modules. And this is what I think is one of the biggest problems on the internet. So quickly, I'm going to introduce these two concepts. So a shapeshifter module, you think about the performance, the thing that the user is going to see in the real world. And then you have a website or an app that has multiple representations of that thing that are often pretty arbitrary. So here you have two things. They have actually different ratios. So one is like a portrait, one is a landscape, one is light, one is dark. They have different metadata on there. And so now the user has to learn that these two things represent that one thing. And you should, if you ever make your user, if you take one thing away from this, if you ever make your user learn two things to represent one thing, you better have a really good reason for it. Okay, you want to weigh consistency with designing for specific contexts. Okay, because every single tiny bit of difference, you're creating some cognitive dissonance there, and you're creating something that they have to relearn. On the flip side, we have masked modules. So this is a client of mine, a healthcare client, and they have their purple icon module. And the purple icon module has a header and a subheader sometimes, and then a little purple icon and a little blurb and a call to action. Now, this purple icon module, it's allowed to be used for multiple different things. So we have, it's representing a calculator. And if you click that, a little calculator interactive thing comes up to figure out how much money you can save if you use this electronic healthcare record. You have a white paper. That's going to take you to a download form. We have a video, which will actually play a video if you press it. And we have a testimonial video, two different types of videos, marketing video versus testimonial video. We have a blog post, and we have something that's a call to action for a demo form. 6 different things represented in the same outfit, basically. Okay, so imagine a cocktail party, maybe the cocktail party that we're going to go to tonight. And imagine if everybody was wearing the exact same outfit. Maybe even they were all wearing like the same hat and the same like mustache or something like that. It would make it very difficult to recognize people and start to get to know people and retain that information even. Now, even to make it even worse, imagine that half of the room was all wearing the same outfit and kind of like the same hat and funny mustache, and the other half of the room continually was changing outfits. Okay, this is the type of web experiences that I think we're creating. We have the things that in the problem domain, and they're represented constantly changing outfits on one side, and then all wearing the same outfit on the other side, and doing both of those things. And it creates a lot of confusion. We're going to talk about LinkedIn later. If you've ever wondered why LinkedIn is a terrible place to be, we don't have any LinkedIn designers here, do we? This is why. There's about 9 to 10 different ways a person is represented on LinkedIn, and it makes it very confusing. Okay, so to think about it, you have the metaphor like don't put the cart before the horse. Is that a metaphor in Poland and Europe? Okay. There's this metaphor, don't put the cart before the horse, right? You don't want to get ahead of yourself. So if you can think about the object model being the horse, being the true engine behind it, and the module library is the cart. That's the thing that users are actually clicking in and interacting with and sitting with, but it's actually being run by an object model, or it should be. Okay, so do we have some engineers and some developers here? Okay. Do y'all use object-oriented programming languages? A few? And there's like the new thing with the functional programming and all that good stuff. So a good definition of object-oriented programming from our friends at Wikipedia is a programming language model organized around objects rather than actions and data rather than logic. Not to say logic is unimportant, it's just the data comes first. So you could say object-oriented UX is a design language model organized around objects rather than actions and data rather than logic. Data first, or you could say content first, then figuring out your logic, then figuring out your interactions. Figure out what type of ball it is before you figure out how a user is going to kick it or throw it, right? Your procedures should be actually derived from the objects. Figure out what the things are and then figure out what a user is going to do to it. So if you think about communication, communication is nouns, verbs, modifiers. Now, in user experience design, often we'll even start with the modifiers. This needs to be trustworthy. It needs to be slick. It needs to feel modern. It needs to feel traditional, especially if you work within a marketing agency. Then we jump straight into the verbs. What does a user need to do in this system? What is the laundry list? What is the functionality? And we don't have, as user experience designers, I know back in programming, definitely this is not true, but in user experience design, we don't have a specific part in our process to think about the nouns. What are the things in this problem domain that are being done to? What are the direct objects? And my best way of defining object-oriented UX is inserting that into your process and actually inserting it before you think about the verbs, before you think about what a user is going to do. Think about what are the things that they are doing it to. I would challenge you to find me an interaction on the web that does not have a direct object. Even creating an account, I'm creating an instance of myself. I'm creating a thing. Otherwise, you're editing things, you're manipulating things, you're grouping things. You're moving things from X to Y. The practice of object-oriented UX, I'm not going to read this slide. We're running a little slow on time. But I'll pick one to read. I already said number 4. Okay, we're good on that slide. So what is an object? At least in these 4 walls, we can define objects in lots of different ways. But the way that I think about an object. So this is my most famous tweet. I got like 37 retweets. It's pretty great. I know. A user's mental model is not something you design. It's something you reflect and respect. It's a user's head movie of the problem domain. So I have another talk that's all about basically hacking your information architecture and that you don't really design your information architecture. You figure out what is the existing information architecture in somebody's head, and you reflect that information architecture. So teachers, I work with teachers a lot. I design for education. So if we think about a teacher's head movie, she's got students, or he, classes, homework, lesson plans, and standards. At least in the US, we have standards, like things that you have to, basically a checklist of stuff that that a teacher has to make sure that she downloads into a student's brain. And so these are the main core things in her mental model. How do I know that? From interviewing about 40 to 50 teachers and talking to them all the time. So then there's also relationships. This is where the magic happens. There's relationships between all of those things. And this is just truth. This is not anything that I designed. This is just extracting it from the users and figuring out what are your things and how do they relate to each other. So your objects, you talk to your users, you listen to the nouns that they use over and over and over again when they're talking about their work, when they're talking about their specific problem domain that you're trying to solve for. Those are your things. If you're designing for a problem domain and whatever that problem domain is, if they don't have representations of those things in the problem domain, or if those representations are really inconsistent and squishy, right, they don't pass the blur your eyes test, then your system, your environment that you're creating is going to be very confusing. Okay, let's go through this slide. So objects, you can think of if you work with content strategists, if you are a content strategist or an information architect, often they're called content types. I don't love content types because I work a lot in products. And a teacher does not think about her student as a content type. She does not even think, even her lesson plans are not really a content type. Standards are not a content type. That's kind of a holdover from our kind of the information architecture document-based thinking. Database engineers as classes, okay? So I like to call it objects because my background is in product, and also my dad is an armchair philosopher. So if we start looking at some of the philosophy behind this, and the cognitive scientists and psychologists are going to call these objects. People call them things. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you guys for a while about why to do this. I've talked a little bit about it, but I'm going to really try to sell you guys on object-oriented UX. So I've talked about mental models, the objects are the things of mental models, but are mental models actually made of objects? There's some people that would argue with me on this, and I would, if you're in the room, I would love to argue with you about that over some drinks tonight. But I'm on the stage right now, so I'm going to go ahead and really look at some research and describe some research for you on the fact that humans do think in objects. Number 2, you want a simple system. And object-oriented UX is going to help you build that simple system that has integrity. And we're going to talk a lot about that. And you need contextual navigation. You cannot rely on that top nav, guys. People aren't going to click it. They might click it, but that is plan B. You want people to navigate through the content, through the objects. You want contextual navigation. When I'm on a thing, I want to see what are the other things that are related to this thing, and can I get there? Okay, so humans think in objects. Does anybody have kids here? Somebody has kids. Does anybody remember first words? English translation of first words? Do you remember first words? What is it? Mom? Okay, after mom, after dad. No? That's a good one. Is that a noun? I think that's a verb. So I hear cat, dog, ball, snack, okay? So kids, when kids start learning languages, when babies start learning languages, what they're doing is they're learning to label the things, okay? So let's see how our audio works. Have y'all seen Bambi? Have y'all seen Bambi in the last 30 years? Okay, we're going to watch this little clip. Oh, it didn't play. Oh, yes.
Those are birds.
William, a little.
Bird. Bird. Look, he's trying to talk. Bird. He's trying to say bird.
Cute.
Say bird. 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 Uh-oh. Bird. Come on, say bird. Say bird. Say bird. Say bird.
Bird.
No, that's not a bird. That's a butterfly. Butterfly.
He has no problem with butterfly. And this goes on for about another 30 minutes.
Butterfly. No, that's a flower.
So what is Bambi learning? Bambi's learning to label. And even whenever Bambi was made, like the 1940s or something, the creators of Bambi still had this intuitive knowledge. This is how language and how communication and how understanding our world starts to progress. So not only is Bambi labeling, he's categorizing. He, she, he. He's categorizing as well. And what I find is so interesting is, seriously, one of our first jobs as human beings is to be information architects. So this is Jean Piaget. He's kind of the granddad of child psychology. Do we have any psychology background people? Yeah. Okay, so this guy, some of his stuff has been refuted, but I think the core pieces of his work are very, very relevant. So he has these different stages of children basically learning to understand their world and progressing in cognitive development. And one of the first things, this is pretty trippy, that we have to learn as newly minted human beings is that objects are actually separate from ourselves, that there are objects. Because if you think about the first 9 months of our life is really everything is us. And then we go into the world and we assume like, oh, it's just a bigger womb, right? Everything is us. This is a more complicated womb. And then we had to learn like, oh, things are independently happening that are out of our control. And things that even actually disappear are still there. So and then we have to learn that about this separation. We actually have a word for it. It's called separation anxiety, when we learn that mom and dad are different than us and are not just an extension of us. So we have to learn that there are objects. Then we have to start categorizing these objects. And we really, as we kind of grow up, we're just becoming better and better at categorization. We have what we call assimilation and accommodation. So we assimilate, we learn a new thing, we say, does this go in an existing category for me? Or do I need to create a new category for this? And then we build a greater understanding of the world just through kind of assimilating and then accommodating and getting more and more complex with our schema. We start understanding ownership, and you can see that this starts to become more procedural. Now, if you have a 2-year-old or a 3-year-old, and they don't really understand ownership yet, right? They're really bad at that. Like if it's cool, then it's theirs, right? If they want it, then it's theirs. Understanding ownership requires the ability to understand procedures. You have to understand buying, you have to understand giving. Okay, even though it's a very simple procedure, they're still not there yet. There's honestly object-oriented before they start learning how to process procedures. If you look at children's books for like a 1 or 2 or 3-year-old, is there a plot in there? No, it's labeling things. A is for apple, B is for ball. Then they start learning various perspectives of objects. So perspective taking is a huge jump and a huge kind of benchmark in cognitive development. So there's still a test that's used today where they put the child on the other side of the table of the researcher or the psychologist, and they put a doll in front, and they face the doll toward the child, and they say, draw the doll from my perspective. And they see if the child can draw the back of the doll's head. So peekaboo. Does anybody play peekaboo with their kid? It's like, or maybe there's a different word for it. It's where you like hide and show. Peekaboo. Okay. Why is this so delightful? Why do kids love this? Well, there's some really great research about peekaboo out there and why kids enjoy it so much. Now, you would think like when you do the peekaboo and it's so delightful, what would happen if when you do peekaboo, the object actually changes after it's covered up? So, I say hi, and I go and I hide, and I come back, and I'm like wearing a monkey mask or something like that. You think that would be even more delightful for a kid, right? Like, oh, it's even more surprising and cool. Like even, we think that it's the surprise that's so exciting for a kid. Actually, it turns out that it is less delightful and actually kind of confusing when they change the object. And it becomes even more, as a child gets older, it becomes even it becomes even less cool to change the object out. They're like, no, don't do that to me. That's not fun. I want you to be the same. And so the theory here is that peekaboo is actually helping us really kind of understand and internalize object permanence, that objects don't change. And then what do we do on the web? We go and change our objects around all the time. So I've been trying to learn a little Polish. Actually, I have a 3-year-old nephew that I'm going to be meeting for the first time, and I was like, if I can get my Polish to where like I can kind of communicate with a 3-year-old, I'm not going to try to talk to you guys in Polish, but my 3-year-old nephew, I will. And so I said, why don't I do this object-orientedly? Instead of just doing the audio thing, which I tried with Spanish and got me nowhere, I'm going to start labeling everything, putting sticky notes on all the things. And I'm actually, you can test me later, I'm pretty good at naming things now. Verbs I'm not so good at. And then somebody, have you guys seen the Polish grandfather video? This is after. Somebody was like, oh yeah, that's a thing. And I was like, oh, I thought I invented it. So we'll just watch a little bit of this.
I am, you are, he, she, it is.
This is basically what I did. It worked
I
really well,
am,
actually.
You
Polish is a hard
are,
language.
he, she, it is. Robert.
So if you think about learning a language and you think about, let's say they say if you have 600 words, you're pretty fluent. Imagine if you had 600 verbs. I don't know how far that would get you. If you had 600 nouns, which was my goal. If you had 600 nouns, okay, now you can start to work with that. Let's say you had 600 nouns and like the top 20 verbs that you could work with really well. And then even some modifiers. You're doing pretty good. Okay, so look back at your words for kitchen. Did anybody here have all 3 nouns? Okay. Now, I'm not going to take these up. I used to take these up. I have a whole spreadsheet of these, but I can guarantee that if we added up all the words in this room, 80% of them would be concrete nouns. We'd have counter, we'd have fridge, we'd have food, we'd have sink, we'd have fork, we'd have knife, beer, maybe. Okay? I've done this quite a few times, and I have probably cooking is only 5% of the words that I've gotten in there. Have some modifiers, some abstract nouns like love or creativity or family. And then for hiking, which is actually a verb and an action, I can guarantee I have a lot of boots and mountain and dog and trail, shorts. But like camping and walking are actually very low. So it really fits that 80-20 rule. About 80% are not just nouns, but concrete nouns, things that are tangible and that can be touched. So this is just a little bit of extra ammunition in my belief that when we're under pressure and we're trying to build a mental model and we're trying to think about a concept, we're going to go to concrete things. So there's this really great book written by a programmer back in 1995 called Object-Oriented User Interfaces. He was ahead of his time. And he wrote, the issue with objects is not about the user interface or OO programming or anything to do with computers. It's how people perceive and act on the world. We, end users, everyone, have evolved to deal with objects since the dawn of time. So even if all the programmers in the world, even if you guys just threw object-oriented programming out the window and stopped using object-oriented databases and went to this extreme functional programming, whatever it is, I would still design like this because it's nice when we can kind of communicate better and we're thinking in objects, but it's that human beings, not just developer human beings are thinking in objects, but all human beings are thinking in objects. Now, actually, I'm going to take that back because it's a little bit different. I'm doing some additional research. This is coming soon on Eastern thought. So Eastern thinking is actually a little bit different. We Westerners are actually much more object-oriented than Eastern philosophy and it's looking more like psychology as well. So that's the monkey wrench in this. But this is what I think is happening. I think that our brains are thinking in objects. User experience designers are coming along and thinking procedurally, thinking about all the procedures. We're going and doing like, and this happens and this happens. We think in task flows and storyboards and user flows. And then we need to build a database, which we need to think about the objects. So I think that we are creating quite a big disconnect here. So reason number 2, you want a simple system, right? You don't want it to be any more complex than what it needs to be. This is good for you as a designer. This is good for you as a developer. This is also good for your users. So this is what we want to avoid. So we're going to spot some shapeshifters here. Going back to these shapeshifter modules. Y'all have Craigslist? Or some equivalent of Craigslist? Doesn't matter. This is Craigslist, which is known for its bad design, but we're going to pick it apart anyway. So this is a listing here. And this is where, unless you have super awesome vision, folks in the back are going to be off the hook. And folks in the front, I'm going to look at you. So this is representing the same thing. It's a listing. It's the same instance of the same thing. And this is map view and grid view. Can you guys see some differences between the map view and the grid view? The date, it's different format, different place. Actually, to get to the details, you click on something different. Yep, so we have actually different metadata showing here. We have square footage in grid view, but if you're in map view, why? I'm in map view. I don't care about square footage anymore. There's other pieces of metadata. In the map view, I can see the number of images. I also have actually a different piece of functionality. See that little X, the little trash can? I can actually remove it from my search results from map view, but not from grid view. The favoriting icon has changed places. Now, this is probably a product of the map view being developed after the grid view, probably maybe even years later. But the outcome here is the user is going to have to relearn this as they are toggling these two different views. And you can see a lot of changes here are most likely arbitrary. Are we going to give Craigslist the credit that they did a bunch of A/B testing and they found out what's more effective in map view versus grid view? No, this is all unintentional. So Google Docs, do you guys use Google Docs? You know how there's Google Docs and then there's like the twilight zone of Google Drive? And you're like, where am I? Am I in Google Docs? Am I in Google Drive? Okay, same exact document here. It's represented differently. The ratio is different, so we are very visual creatures. Ratio is different. Actually, how I go and interact with this. So if I want to delete this document, if I'm in Google Docs, I click those 3 little dots and I click delete. If I'm in Google Drive, then I right-click it. It's a small thing, but why Google? Why are you, this is not what I want to use my brain power on. Eventbrite is another one. I'll just give some away here on the home page. You have the ability to bookmark your metadata that you see. You see a business and professional, you see category. But in the search results, you don't see the category, but you do see who is putting on the event. So I'm having to relearn this stuff. LinkedIn. This is old LinkedIn, I know. LinkedIn is my favorite to pick on. So all sorts of differences. They recently did a redesign, and this has not gotten any better in the redesign. I just haven't taken new screenshots. But let's just look at how you message somebody. So if I'm in connections, did you see that little hover? Did you see that? Okay. I hover over the little message thing. You can see the big blue message button for search results in the Axure company page. And then if I'm in the Axure World group page, there's that little hover over there. I have to learn 3 different ways on how to message somebody. If we look at the Axure company page, my good friend Victor Hugh here, Sue, can see, I actually think I have it highlighted. Yeah. Now, I can see here on this flyout, this little gray icon, the number 9, and a bunch of people that I kind of know. And then on the Axure company page, I see this green thing that says 9 shared connections. So using my deductive reasoning, which I love to do when I'm trying to figure out interfaces, that was sarcasm, I can probably figure out that those 9 is shared connections. So those are the same thing. Now, come on, why not at least give me the same icon and make them green in both places so I can recognize this a little bit better? So we're taking a thing, we're taking this shared connection idea, this shared connection concept, and we're shape-shifting it. We're representing it differently. Okay, so election results, 2012. So this is my very first responsive design. Pretty nice looking. We kept it pretty consistent. But then if we look at the flyout and the grid view here, You know, this was 2012. This is the kickoff of all of this thinking. So we have all sorts of things that are sort of moved around and different here. And the one that really gets me is the estimated percent N. You see that black bar there? It's represented differently and in a different place in the flyout view. All right, so 2016. Beautiful, nice, airy design. We kept it super, super consistent. Flyout view and grid view exactly the same. But then I went to Amsterdam for 2 weeks and took my hands off the wheel. And then this little module was made. And this is not so bad, but, you know, still, it's like the thorn in my side. This module was made to go on article pages and kind of float around. And what really gets me is we're actually showing the winner of the state is actually different. So instead of like the red background with the white text, we're inverting it. And so somebody's learning that like, oh, the red bar at the top, that's what means that that state has been won. And then we show it differently in other places on the site. And then this one really got me. So the homepage. So CNN has a separate homepage team. And at the last minute, we said, okay, how do we want to represent this on the homepage? So we had this beautiful, nice, white, airy design. And the homepage team was like, we want lens flares. We want gradients. We want it to be like dark dashboard looking. So what do? So then we end up with a design where we have something like Nevada here, represented with a module that looks like that, and then you click into it and you get to this. And this to me is like walking into like what looks like a sushi restaurant, and then you walk in and it's like Mexican cantina. So this is very disconcerting. Or a little bit, but all these little things add up. Okay, so an easier life for everybody, for you, for developers, definitely for your users, is what I like to call integrity modules. So this is the new Eventbrite. Remember we looked at Eventbrite previously. This is the new Eventbrite. Exactly the same everywhere. The only thing that kind of gets me, you can see the price. The price is that little thing in the top right corner on the kind of blocky modules. They do move the price to the lower left-hand corner of the image. I just keep it in the top right corner of the image, but everything else, exactly the same. Kickstarter from day one. Do y'all have Kickstarter in Europe? Yeah, right? Okay. Kickstarter from day one, exact same module everywhere. Now, even the big featured module, all they're doing, I mean, you can have different orientations and different layouts of this thing, but you're keeping the prioritization the same. So they were like, and this makes it a lot easier to develop something as well. They created this new thing called, they had like curated pages. So Art Basel could curate a page and bring a bunch of projects that they think are really interesting. And did they redesign the module for this new type of thing? No. They had the same module and then they put the little blurb next to it. And it works just fine. They didn't go reinvent the wheel. Now, if you log into Kickstarter and you see the projects you've backed, you now see it in a different format. Right now, we have a very different context and we have very different needs from our project. We're not browsing projects to back. We're actually looking at the projects that have already succeeded. They've gotten their funding, they're backed, and now I have messages, I show the amount that I backed. You can see I'm pretty cheap about that, and I can see what reward I'm supposed to get for that. So very different information. Now, I would probably be much more conservative, and I'd probably not put it in a table view. I'd want to look at some research on how many people really have like more than 3 unbacked projects at any given time. But like I said at the beginning of this talk, what I really would love for you guys to take away more than anything is customizing your modules for different contexts. Be intentional about it. Be conservative about it. Always remember you're weighing these things. And make sure it's research-based. Different modules for different contexts, different representations of an object. This is not MVP. All right, MVP, when you're first getting a new thing out there, make sure it's represented completely consistently. And then use your data to say, okay, price is really more important over here than it is when the user is looking at it over here. So let's move price up and make it big and bold. and then research it again and make sure it's not screwing with people. Okay, and they can't find the price now because they're used to the price being over here. Like, is it actually worth it? So make sure it's worth it. Okay, so we're going to do a worksheet real quick. It's going to be your first worksheet, and don't overthink this, guys. This is super easy. This is just to really drill down this concept. So we're going to fix the shapeshifter module. So we're going to talk a lot about an app. And guys, is it okay? So we started, what, about 15 minutes late? We might go like 5-10 minutes over. Leave if you absolutely have to. I won't be mad. Okay, so shapeshifter module worksheet. So we're going to talk a little bit about this imaginary application, and it's for fans and celebrities, and basically it's going to be a kind of a creepy application. It's going to be for fans to sort of stalk celebrities, all right? And we have a fan module, basically for you to, the representation of the fan, the user, if you will. And right now there's 3 different ways they're being represented. So the first thing I want you to do is kind of do an inventory of all the different elements that make up this module across these 3 different modules. So really you're just listing these things out, and I've started the list for you. We have a headshot, we have the name. Now go ahead and spend about 30 seconds and list out the other things that you're seeing here across these 3 modules. Okay, so have you guys filled up that list? Do you have things like the city, the home city, as an element? The activity, the level of activity that they have, the number of years they've been a member, the last active timestamp, right? Nobody overthought this and made it harder than what it is, right? You're literally just looking at those things and listing them out. Now, go ahead, and now what you want to do, and we're going to speed through this, but think about the prioritization of those things. And what we would do, this is real life, is we would actually involve users in this, we would involve stakeholders, and we would prioritize these elements. Now, imagining that you've prioritized these, what I want you to do is do a quick thumbnail sketch. Just do what you think is the most important thing, and redesign this. So instead of having 3 modules floating around, we have the one Uber module that's going to work everywhere. So you're just sketching this out. Again, but you want to make sure that, let's do this actually. Go ahead and prioritize and cross off 3 things. The 3 bottom things of the prioritization. Whatever you think is not important, just cross it off and just focus on those things that you've prioritized. Okay, so if you look up here, basically what I did, I got, and you can kind of compare. So I had headshot, name, home city, activity meter, active last timestamp, number of years a member, why you, what is that one? I don't know. First, why you like this celebrity, why you like celebrity tracking, little bio basically. And then since how long you've been a member. So I cut a few of these I said we don't need the active last timestamp because we have the activity meter. That's what matters most. These are arbitrary decisions, but of course we would research this and talk about it a lot more. And then member since, we have number of years member. We don't need both of those. Member since is a little bit nicer. I like that one more. And then I numbered them, so I had a prioritization, and then redesigned a module based on that. Okay. One more worksheet. We're not going to look at any more masked modules because I want to skip through this, but we're going to fix the masked modules. So we have celeb, we have movie, and we have city. And if you look at these, if you do the blur your eyes test, these basically look exactly the same. Remember that purple icon module? That's what this is here. We have basically the same module. Maybe we call it our landing page card. And it looks exactly the same for the celebrity, movie, and the city. Maybe the designer even thought that they were being really slick by designing one module for all sorts of things can fit in that one module. But let's instead, so I went ahead and did celebrity, go ahead and just do a quick thumbnail sketch without actually changing any of the elements, and just to sort of move things around so that they look distinct. It's going to feel arbitrary. Just go spin about, we'll do 1 minute. I'm going to play some music for you. All right, so what I did here, again, this is not rocket science. I turned my movie thing kind of into like a movie poster. So like the image in the background, because if you think about movie posters, they're sort of landscape. You see them at the theater. So I thought, okay, maybe I can make it look like a movie poster, and I'll put the stars at the top, because in movie posters, they usually have like, this is what the credits are saying, and then the title across the middle. And then for the city, I want to put that landscape image at the top with the skyline. This is a kind of going back to, okay, as a side note, you know how we put people in circles all the time now? Like every app everywhere puts the headshot in a circle. Probably some of you are like, why is it always in a circle? I actually love this because it's created it like a language across the internet that now we know people, when we see the circular image, and it actually makes sense, it's more organic, right? We think of circles as the organic and squares as the more, as the, whatever the opposite of organic is, not inorganic. So I actually really like that. Places, often places, I'll like to put them in landscape, get landscape images, even like a 16 by 9. So I put the skyline across the top, and I just sketched out the bars, like doing bars instead of doing stars. So just a different visual representation for that piece of metadata. Okay, reason number 3, the menu, it is your fire escape. When I mean the menu, I mean that consistent kind of global top navigation. So I did a survey it was a very open-ended survey, and I said, when you go to a new website for the first time, where do you start? What do you click on first? The content on the page, or do you go to the top navigation? And the 80-20 rule came through for me. About 80% of people said we go to the content on the page, click those big shiny objects, right? We spend a lot of time on our top navigation, but it turns out users don't really love picking through all of our navigation. One woman said, content on the page first, the navigation is your fire escape. And I absolutely love that. So if you think about your users, you can think about them saying, like, okay, let me try to get through it with the big shiny objects. And then they can't find what they're looking for. And they're like, oh, fine, I'll go to the navigation and see if I can use that. Another thing you can think about is on a mobile device, what is the first thing that we hide on a mobile device? We hide the navigation. We put it away in a little hamburger. So we want to make sure that we have both. We still need the global navigation, but it's sort of the backup plan. I would almost think about it as plan B. And as a more morbid analogy that I give is your system should work if you cut the head off and cut the feet off, right? Cut the header and the footer off, your system should still stay alive. The user should be able to get to everything just through contextual navigation. So your global nav, that's your OG, and the contextual navigation, that's what I get very excited about, and making sure that you have a lot of contextual navigation. So if you think about an object, if an object is basically the building blocks of the system, what are the building blocks of an object? And how can some of those building blocks help you navigate? So you have core content, text, images, video. That's not going to help you navigate. You have metadata, of course, unless you have inline text links, sure. You have metadata. Metadata does help you navigate, right? What happens if, let's say this is a movie, and one of those pieces of metadata is comedy. What happens when I click on comedy? I go to a section with all comedies, maybe, if it's, we'll get to that later. I go to basically a list of movies filtered by comedy in some way, shape, or form, right? So I can kind of navigate through metadata. We have calls to action. That's navigating into procedures, navigating into flows, navigating into interaction, the entry points, if you will, to interaction. And then we have my favorite, nested objects. So nested objects are objects within other objects. This is objects that are related to this object, or objects that are a part of this object. So if this is movie, what might some nested objects be? The actors in the movie. Anything else? The fans that like this movie. Comments, reviews about this movie. Now, sometimes metadata, we're getting into the weeds here a little bit. Sometimes a nested object can act like metadata. Like take the city that this movie was filmed in. Kind of metadata, right? But let's say if I click on Warsaw, then I don't just go to a filtered list. I don't go to just a search results page of all the movies that were filmed in Warsaw. Maybe I see a really nicely designed landing page. I see a skyline of Warsaw. I see the movies that were filmed in Warsaw. And then maybe I can also see celebrities that are born in Warsaw, celebrities that live in Warsaw. And maybe I even also see fans that are active in Warsaw. And I might even see not just movies that were filmed in Warsaw, but movies that were set in Warsaw. Okay, so now I get this kind of more rich page. So I can actually upgrade. And this is just another little side note that in the longer version of this I talk a lot about, is being able to say, when can we take metadata and upgrade it to an object or downgrade an object from metadata because we need to get something out the door. So it's a really good way to scale your project. The number of, and another side note inside of the side note, as a consultant, I do a quick object-oriented UX activity before I ever give an estimate, because the number of objects basically is a direct correlation to the complexity of the system. I can go ahead and say, okay, this is 19 distinct objects, all right, versus 3 distinct objects. Okay, so we kind of already talked about this. Oh, I had a visualization for it. Okay, comedy, click on comedy, you go to a filtered list, click on actor. I could just go to like an actor of a filtered list of all the movies that this actor was in, or I could go to some sort of detail page. All right, this exercise, because I do want to get you guys out the door, but I want to give you a demo of how I actually do object-oriented UX. So we'll do just do the first column, just the first column. So here, and I'll talk. You already have the first column. We're gonna do the second column. Okay. So this nested objects matrix. This is a thing that I actually use in my work, where I have, if we have the objects celebrity, movie, fan, and city. What we can do is we can create a matrix where we put those same objects on the X and Y axis, and we in the intersection, think about what relationships there could be. So this is a way to make sure that you are testing, at least even having a small conversation with yourself or with your team members on, is there a relationship there? So just in this first column, if we think that, let's say when celebrity is the parent, how does celebrities fit inside? Well, we have similar celebrities. Now, we would actually want to say a little bit more about how are they similar. Are they in similar movies? Do they look the same? Are they the same age and gender? We have celebrities nearby, this celebrity. For movies, we have the movies that this celebrity is in. We might have the movies that they're currently filming. And the boxes is just showing a many-to-one relationship or a one-to-one relationship. Movies currently filming, that should probably be a many-to-many relationship. They could be filming multiple movies at the same time. We have the fans that are following this celebrity. So you can almost think I'm sort of building my detail page here. Okay, how do I fit all these other modules of other representations of other objects onto this page? Well, I want to see the fans that like this celebrity. I might even connect cities. So if this is a celebrity from Warsaw, maybe I would even see, here's some fans that are like nearby that are also in Warsaw. So we can connect it actually through another object, fancy. The city that they're currently in right now, maybe with some critical mass of fans have stalked that person enough to know that what city they're in. And their common haunts. They visit Warsaw a lot, but they live in LA. Okay, so let's go ahead and we'll spend about a minute just doing that first column for movie and just doing that thought experiment. If I'm on the movie detail page, how are we going to insert these other modules? Okay, so for movie, what did we have? How do we show celebrities inside of a movie? Actors that are in it. Yeah, it's that easy. Okay, what about movies with movie? Sequels. Sequels would be cool to separate from just regular related movies, similar movies, some movies that are in the same genre. Same director. And since this is location based, did anybody put movies that are filmed in the same city? So actually, we haven't really talked about the goals of this app, but you might say, if this is a movie that was filmed in Warsaw, here are some other movies that were also filmed in Warsaw. So you're actually connecting it through another object and or piece of metadata, basically. If we say city, we could probably, if we're really pressed for time, we could probably downgrade city from an object to just metadata, but we can connect it to other objects. What about fans inside of a movie? Fans that want to see this movie? What's that? Fans that have given a rating? And once you say fans that have given a rating or rated this movie, now you're saying, oh, now movies, you have to kind of say that that's a piece of metadata, right? That movies have ratings based on fans, crowdsourced ratings. What? Did you have one? No? Okay, city inside a movie. All I can hear is the background noise. What? Yes? So it's, we would want to have, what's that? So that would be in the movies, right? So if we have if we have a city module, and we want to say, okay, if I'm on the movie page, how am I going to get users to cities? That's really what we're trying to do here, is we're trying to create systems that are sort of like a snake eating its tail, right? We want them to be able to always have interesting and related things that they can move on to. So if I see the city, now I can go to that city. I can say, oh, this is the city that this film was filmed in, and these are cities that this film was set in, and then I go to that city, and that city is this very interesting page of additional movies and fans and other objects. Okay, we are going to skip over to a demo of object mapping because, all right, guys, it is 1:30. How am I doing? If you want to leave, you can leave. It's fine. But this is the demo. This is how you actually do all this stuff. So if you're sort of sold on this and you're like, this is kind of cool, this is how I actually go through the process. So we're going to do an example. This is for Hot Saucery, which is an imaginary store. They right now have a very simple brochure site. And they have 6 locations, and they really want to become like the destination for hot sauce, not just in brick and mortar, but on the web as well. So they want to make their site much more engaging and much more dynamic. So here's their goals. And what we're going to do to start off with is we're actually going to look at the goals, and we're going to extract objects from goals. We would also do this from stakeholder interviews and also from research, but usually the stakeholder interviews and the research are going to boil down into the goals. So we can start here to start figuring out what our objects are. So the first goal is we want to drive visitors to each of our unique locations. What's the object there? Locations, sure. We want to introduce, promote, and sell our specialty hot sauces. What's the object there? Nice, okay. We want to present our mixologists as the experts they are, encouraging a whole new generation to become hot sauce mixologists. This is a very hipster store. They all wear suspenders. What's the object? Mixologists. All right. We want to help build appreciation and exemplify our expertise in the art of hot saucery through classes and workshops as well as free online recipes. Beautiful. And then the last one, we want to teach about products we sell in the store, like specialty ingredients, tools, and bottles. What's the object? I heard some mumbling. Okay. Now, specialty tools, ingredients, and bottles. We might later say that those all need their specific templates, because if you think about every object, we're probably going to need a template for. More objects, more design. All right. So we might say, okay, for now, products. We'll put ingredients, tools, and bottles all kind of on the product template. We might have a debate about specialty hot sauces. Is that different than products? The products we make versus the products we also happen to sell. But I know specialty hot sauces, we're going to need metadata like a heat index and we might want to have the history of it and some other cool stuff. So I want those to be separate. And then things like classes and workshops. Is a class and a workshop, are those different? Are those separate? So there's a little bit of an art and a science to that. And so here's the procedure that I use. This is what I call object mapping. So I take my objects and I put them on a blue sticky note. And if we were in a full workshop now, I'd be giving you a design challenge, and you'd be putting objects on blue sticky notes. And I color code it just so I can always like look at it, and it just makes it easier. And then I go through and I figure out, remember that core content and that metadata. I go through and I think about core content and metadata, and I put core content on yellow and I put metadata on red. And the difference and the reason to differentiate these is because metadata has a lot more design implications, right? Core content, it's kind of tough for the content strategist, but image and text, right? I care about the size and the amount, but metadata, something like even price, okay? What currencies are we going to be in? Can the user toggle currency? Something like heat index. We might do a full day brainstorming just how to represent heat index on this cool new website, right? So a lot more design implications. And also, when I go into designing my list page or my container page for this thing, those red is going to basically tell me what can I filter and what can I sort by. So it's going to help me design containers for these things. Then my favorite part, I go through and I basically do that matrix in my head, where I say, what are the nested objects here? So I might start over at location and say, okay, how do we fit each of these into that object? So let's just look at class. So under class, we have ingredients that are provided, okay? So that's connecting it to product. We have the recipes that are taught during this class, and we have the mixologist that is the teacher. Now I've forgotten one. Which nested object did I forget that needs to be on class? Location, beautiful. So we want to make sure that location, and now often what we do is we end up having what I call dead metadata, where maybe there's the location is shown, but I can't actually click on that location and see everything about the location. Now, how does something like this, this is my favorite step to do with clients and stakeholders, is prioritization, doing a forced prioritization of these elements and saying, this is the most important thing to the least important thing. And this is, I cannot tell you how great it is to have something like this before you even start wireframing, because then you're moving around little things and adding things a lot less when you're in Sketch or Photoshop or Axure, because you've already figured it out when you're in sticky note medium. Then I'll actually do a call to action inventory and start brainstorming what are all the things that you can do to each of these objects. And this is a great way to figure out really what is your product going to do, which is often kind of a very intimidating thing. But this sort of corrals the kind of sort of very intimidating nature of figuring out what kind of functionality should be within this product. If you think about, well, what does a user need to do to all the things in this problem domain? You can really figure out how much interaction there needs to be. And I will often bring this into a spreadsheet and start putting in kind of estimates on how complex each of these interactions are. Basically, this all turns into modules, details, and lists. You have the modules, which are the little representations. You have the detail page, which is the full shebang. And then you have containers of these things, which are landing pages, which mix them all up. You have lists, which lets you filter and sort of a certain type of object. And then you have interaction design, but we already know how to do interaction design. Interaction design is tough, but we have a lot of tools for that already. The things that happen after you click the call to action. So if you look at Kickstarter, it has it. Amazon has it. You'll start to recognize, okay, modules, detail pages, and list pages. So if you take, let's just take, what is this? Our hot sauce. So if we take our hot sauce, we just basically transpose that column of the object map. And how do we turn that into a module? Okay, we might take the things that are the most prioritized and the most relevant and make our module. How do we make our detail page? Okay, well, we want to make sure to get everything in there. So So this is making wireframe really, really easy because I have my laundry list of all the things that I need in here. And then for my list pages, okay, I have my modules, and then I look at the red for the folks in the front that can read that. So the red is my metadata. What might I want the user to be able to filter and sort by if they're looking at all the hot sauces? Thank you, Magda. So I might put something like this on here, right? Now I can filter and sort by price and heat index. Then I can do some sketching. I have some very special sketching sheets that sort of help me move my thinking along with modules and details and list pages. Once I've done a couple iterations of this, I'm good to go building a prototype. And even though my prototype might be a highly interactive prototype, if I get this sort of like core ability to navigate through these different types of objects, what I can do, just a side note on testing, is I put the calls to action on there. And this I can actually go into some user testing with all they're doing is navigating. All I'm doing is getting for a feel, does this match your mental model? Is this how you would say, like, oh, these are how these connections work. This feels natural to go from this thing to this thing to this thing to this thing. And then they get an idea of what those things are and how they're represented. I can have very meaningful conversations. Are these the right calls to action? Are these the things, do you want to add this to your wish list? Do you want to be able to group these things? Because then, if I figure out that, yes, these seem to be the right calls to action on here, I can feel much more confident in investing all that time that it takes to build those interactions out. Because interaction design, this stuff is easy. This I spend 2 days on maybe. And then it's that interaction design, then testing and making sure these are the interactions that I actually want on here. Because I only want to do the interaction design for the things that are actually people or feel like is the correct interactions on those objects. So before I close up today, exactly 10 minutes over, sorry guys, just my short sales pitch for you. So I usually do this as a full day workshop. Okay, if you thought this was interesting, come talk to me, get a business card. We actually dive into this. We build object maps. We do a call to action inventory. We do sketching sprints. It's really, really fun. So if you are interested in learning more about object-oriented UX, you can also look at my website, rewiredux.com/OOUX, has a bunch of stuff on there. Or just come talk to me and we can discuss it further. Thanks, guys. Thanks for your attention.